Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone. And tonight we will, as always, have live viewer call-ins via Skype pretty much any time that you want. We will have the weekly current Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics. We will have sort of a Season 3 catch-up review of the last couple of episodes of Star Trek Discovery, and a rare look at an example of good journalism, amazingly enough. But this is a live stream, so even if you're not able to get to me via Skype or vice versa, you can feel free to talk with me in chat about anything that you want. You can talk to me and ask me any question, whether it's political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without YouTube ranking my videos and channel even lower than they already do, the United States Civil War II, or even things pertaining to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I am happy to answer each question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some personal subjects that I won't discuss, but anything else, pretty much fair game. I will get to as many of my viewers as possible with the understanding that I don't really want my stream to go longer than 3 hours because it screws up my back because I'm an old man. Now, if you'd like to call into the show, I'm doing it via Skype, and since I don't want to give out all of my Skype information in public, I'd rather handle it this way. If you are interested in talking with me directly and being on the show, send me an email to callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and then I'll Skype you back. So again, if you're interested in talking with me directly and being on the show, email me at callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and I will Skype you back. That email address again is callin@sylranch.tv. So, as always, while I wait for a few more viewers to pile in, I'm going to give you, as always, the answer to the question that nobody asked. What are this week's Lancaster County virus statistics? As always, I source these from a good source. It's a lengthy, nasty URL, but it's in my description box. I always do my sourcing. You can find out basically everything that you want to about Nebraska virus statistics. The only thing I would suggest is that you go to the total number as opposed to the last 14 days, because the last 14 days won't tell you the whole story. The whole number is, in fact, what I use. So the statistics are the Lancaster County population remains roughly 319,090, probably a little up from that last time they did a census. The total number of Lancaster County tests is at 119,588, which is up 10,420 from 2 weeks ago when I last did this. This is not, by the way, representative of a percentage of population, because a single test may trigger multiple other tests of the same individual. And they will test individuals who are very weird to be tested. I had a cousin that passed away. They tested her for that virus. I have another person who is a good friend of a family member of mine, and they tested this good friend of my family member, even though there was really no reason to do it. So, and he came back negative. So those total tests don't tell you anything really about the number of people in terms of positive tests. However, we are also looking at the total Lancaster County positive tests, which are now stand at about 17,336. This is up about 3,788 from 2 weeks ago. This does, in fact, represent the fourth spike in as many weeks. It's been a month long. And it probably corresponds to the additional tests and, as always, the weather. Whenever you start getting cold weather, like we've started to get, you tend to spend more time inside. The total number of deaths in Lancaster County is up to 74. This is up 13 from 2 weeks ago, which corresponds again to the increased number of positive tests. And this actually represents a dip if you look at how it had been going. It had been going up about 10 a week. This has actually dropped down to 7 a week. So this actually represents a bit of a dip. Deaths as a percentage of total tested is a 0.0169%, which is up a 0.006% from 2 weeks ago, which makes it statistically identical. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is at 0.426%, which is down 0.024% from 2 weeks ago. Statistically, it's essentially identical. We've had the cold weather go cold again, so we're staying inside a lot more. And until that happened, we had generally been sitting around 0.3%. This is a fractional uptick, but it's still less than 1/2 of 1%. Deaths as a percentage of population is 0.0232%, up 0.04% 2 weeks ago, but it is statistically identical. What uptick there is probably corresponds to the increased number of deaths and tests, and again, the weather, because we're all staying inside. Hey, Shadow Man, how's it going? Glad to see you as well. How's life treating you? So, man, politics. What do you talk about? It's getting to a what the hell do you talk about situation. Shadow Man is saying, how the hell is the virus deathly pandemic when we have had flu seasons with higher deaths as a result of it? You want my honest opinion about it? It was the media propaganda complex trying to find something that would make Trump look bad. And so they came down like crazy on this. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, not really. But he did come down like crazy on it. So they came down like nuts on it. I think it was just to try to make Trump look bad. It was just that simple. And it worked. It worked, obviously, clearly. This should have been something that was a slam dunk for Trump, and it turned out not to be. Sorry, I'm checking on my secondary monitor. And it turned out not to be. Really, there was no reason for it. There was really no reason for it. While I don't think anything happened that was manufactured, I'm not one of those people who thinks everything is necessarily kind of any kind of conspiracy. But I think they certainly took advantage of it, because they do that. That's what they do most of the time, is take advantage of it. Yep, Shonan says, pandemic makes the most sense, but what is the end game? Let me grab some more people. Well, I don't know what I don't know. Again, it's hard for me to, when you get into conspiracies of a global nature, it's hard for me to start crediting those, because ultimately you're going to get somebody who's going to spill the beans. It's why I don't think there was any conspiracy to bring down the Twin Towers on 9/11. I think the event was used by people in government to further their own ends. That, I think that's certain, but that's what they always do when something like that happens. But, in terms of, what an end game might be, if there is one, clearly we're seeing a definite move towards socialism in the United States. And I think we're seeing that, too, in other countries to some extent. This notion that there could be a good world socialist or communist government is one that's starting to gain ground in places, and I hope won't gain much ground in the future. Because that would be just about the worst fracking thing that could happen. Speaking of which, as I mentioned here, for me, I'm getting to a point with politics where I like to be, frankly, which is, what do you say? What do we say about it here? We have some things going on in the courts, which, as I mentioned last week, I don't see any Kraken being released. I see ultimately a Biden presidency. I don't see how anything would make it, give it so that Trump has enough votes. You could conceivably get to the point where he has just enough so that it has taken the 270 away from Biden. But then it goes to the House of Representatives to decide, and then it becomes just totally unpredictable. I think going to the House is the last thing anybody should ever want. I don't think you should ever want it to go to the House. How are things in terms of protests and conflict between the left and right where I am? Interestingly enough, I've got a piece about that when I'm going to talk about good journalism. But we had this last weekend. A guy attempt to commit arson with a truck that was already on fire, smashing it into a local what was it? The Sonic Drive-In, a Sonic Drive-In, and two people. He did some shooting as well. Two were killed. Two were wounded. So if you notice and this is true on my social media, you'll notice that my icon, my avatar is a Nebraska Cornhuskers logo with my usual jackalope sitting on top of it in memoriam and solidarity with the people who were involved in that. We're also seeing some fair level of civil unrest. There was a black guy in Omaha who was killed by the police, and so it started to go insane there. It isn't pretty, that's for sure, but the thing about a Biden presidency is, one of the things in terms of, back to the status quo is that I think, you're going to see, we probably, if the right doesn't go crazy, I think we probably have, dodged a civil war in this, because the left has no reason to be crazy anymore. And they're going to calm down, and the press isn't going to be going constantly after the president and try to make him out as literal Hitler. So that's all going to die down. All the stuff about, racist, homophobic, etc., that's all going to die down from the press, because it's going to be a Democrat who's sitting in the seat. So, that level, we may have dodged something. On another level, we're going to be going back to politics as usual. And Shadow Man saying the right doesn't go crazy. That's generally true. They don't. I'm not expecting, if it comes out like I think it will with a Biden presidency, I'm not expecting the right to go nuts. I think they have a long history of just going, well, okay, better next time. We got to do better next time. Better next time. I think next time, better next time, Republicans means that you're going to take all of the horrifying, attack vectors that are inherent in the way voting is done now and use them to your benefit. Try to figure out a way that you don't get caught, but use them for your benefit, because after the Democrats lose enough seats, they'll decide that maybe we need to do something about this terribly porous, porous, kind of like a sieve, voting that we have going on. So, but it's going to likely be back to essentially business as usual, status quo, what we have essentially had going on for most of my lifetime, all of my lifetime. A pair of parties that really, from my perspective as a libertarian, differ only by degrees. And that's one nice thing about it going back. It's nice and it isn't nice. I get to go back to my default position, which I wasn't able to do while Trump was in office. Not because it was impossible to do, but because while he was in office, I kept having to, correct people. No, he didn't do this. No, he didn't do that. You're looking at an example of the media propaganda complex. You're not looking at something that really happened. So I was kind of required to, do that all the time. Now, well, it's going to be back to business as usual. So I have my usual libertarian positions to take. The same thing I've been doing since the, at least the Clinton administration. And part of the reason I make videos is so that I don't have to repeat myself. I have been saying the same thing over and over and over and over again for a long time now. And I finally got tired of repeating myself. So I made some videos, and still probably will, that were essentially me making out, here is my position, this is why it's right. But once I've done that, it sits there and applies over and over and over and over and over again, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican office. They will always apply. So it leaves me with a situation where I'm running out of things to say. I'm actually kind of happy about that. As I've said repeatedly before, I way prefer it when I can do things that are just science fictional related. But unfortunately, the woke have made that impossible. You can't even do something as, simple as science fiction without the woke making life miserable for you. So I haven't been able to just do that because it's been all consuming, and up until the election. And it was all consuming in a way that, if you watched me, I was voting for Trump. And, and that was not because I loved him. It was because I thought that the way that the Democrats are running, they should not be allowed to come to power at all, ever, period, end of story. And so I didn't want to vote for another party, which would have been what I might have done, leading to a split vote or something. I've seen that once in my life already. And it got us Clinton. And then kept the Clinton in the public eye for the next 20 years. Anyhow, I don't remember where I was going with it, but what's definitely going to happen is we're going to be going back to, these two parties that'll be doing the usual things, and we won't have any of those, cool, Senate or congressional hearings against people like the media propaganda complex or the big tech propaganda complex. We won't be having those anymore. What will happen is those guys will go back to what usually happens with large businesses like that, which is they make lots and lots of payments to different congressmen, senators, presidents, etc., on both sides of the aisle so that they'll leave them alone. That's what happened with Microsoft. I don't know if anybody else remembers it, but Microsoft was under investigation, I've forgotten whether it's by House or Senate, in the early 2000s for being a monopoly and violating monopoly things. Well, weird thing about this was, up until that time, for some bizarre reason that I cannot figure out, Microsoft and Bill Gates were not making contributions to candidates or people in office. And as soon as he started doing that, everything went away. He got it. You got to pay him off for him to leave you alone. Okay, got it. What's going to happen is it's all going to go back away, disappear, and we're going to be continuing to be essentially victims of this press propaganda complex, and they're not going to do anything about it, and nothing's going to change. And the only thing that the Republicans can do next time around is to take advantage of all of the massive numbers of attack vectors. Take advantage of them for yourself. Figure out a way that you can do it like the Democrats did without getting caught. But do it for yourself, because once you do that, then they'll be interested in actually changing things for the better. Dalton says, "Evening, Bill. How was my Thanksgiving?" Let's see. My Thanksgiving was pretty good. I didn't have a show on Thanksgiving, partly because it was Thanksgiving, and partly because I have a regular thing that I'm putting out there as of last year, and I'm probably going to re-record it next year because I think it needs to be re-recorded. But I always put up on Thanksgivings, I put up my cover, if you can call it that, my cover of Alice's Restaurant Massacre Revisited. So I always put that up. But otherwise, my Thanksgiving was pretty good. We had lots of food, as always. I ate things I shouldn't, as always. And watched my blood sugar go up, as always. But, 2 or 3 times a year, who cares? Which does remind me, after this is over, I got to go out and get myself something to eat because I'm low on groceries. Let's see. Shadow Man saying, the thing at the moment is people in adjustment mode. Yeah, I think that's probably true. Yes, I'm watching because when it first went down, the right was just going nuts about. As I've said a million times, I think there probably was fraud, but can you prove it in court, which is what matters? No, I don't think you can. So, there were people who are, it's going to be amazing. Trump's going to pull some kind of thing, and there were all kinds of conspiracy hypotheses. I cannot call them theories. They are conspiracy hypotheses. There were conspiracy hypotheses being thrown around. We had we're going to release the Kraken, which probably ain't going to go much where, guys. I'm sorry. So I think people on the right are sort of getting used to the idea that this is not going to go down the way they want. People on the left, well, I mean, it depends how things go down there, what they're actually able to do, if anything. Best thing that could happen, the absolute best thing that could happen, would be total gridlock. You want complete and utter gridlock. You want them to not be able to do a damn thing. This Senate still has the power. If you can keep them from crossing party lines, they have the power to stop things from going through. That might, I would say everything. I would just go, okay, nothing. Just vote no on everything. Every single thing, vote no. Just on general principles. That's what I think they should do to really keep things from getting crazy, which they might. Drop of truth. Hey, nice to see you. Warring days are here again. It's time fear and ball again. Yep. Oh, I'm at 2 point. Oh, Weirs again. Crabby days are here again under Biden. Well, I don't know how crabby it's going to turn out to be. It can't turn out to be good. Anyone who believes that government is the answer to your problems, you're going to have problems. I don't know exactly what will happen. I just don't know. All I know is we are getting into a place again where I am having less and less to say, because it's all defaulting back to my default position. Unlike Second Amendment. To begin with, it's the Second Amendment. But the second, mainly, it's there for you because more guns equals less crime. And we know this. There's a whole book about it. We can see the stats in front of us. So things are going to default to there. Medicine, well, it's been screwed up by 100 years worth of government interference. So that's where my position is going to be. Nothing's changed. All that's happened is we've gone back to normal, if you can call it that. I don't think normal is a good thing, but I think we've gotten back to it now. And so my positions are going to have already been stated about 1 million times. Let's see. Blazer 101 says Bill, there won't be a next time if they don't get rid of the mail-in ballots. Well, that's not going to happen, unfortunately. That is unfortunately not going to happen. The only way that can happen is if that's hurting the Democrats, which is why I suggest to Republicans make use of all of those attack vectors for yourself. Make it so that it's going to hurt the Democrats, and then they'll change it. But they're not going to touch it as long as they're not being hurt by it. Shadowman says, I never thought there was any chance of a civil war. Yeah, well, if you watched me, I thought there was a chance of it. And I said before the thing that I thought maybe the only way you avoid it is if Biden wins. I don't think it's good that Biden won on a number of levels, but it seemed to me that was probably the way you avoid it, and it looks like that's what's happened. Wait around until next time, I guess. I don't know. Drop 2 says, adjustment mode, it's near a psychotic break as I see it. Yeah, over the last 4 years, they have had something, and I don't know what you call it, but it's some kind of general psychotic break. I was worried about what would happen after 8 years of actually having a psychological problem, real one, that you should go see actual therapist about. I was worried what would happen if they had that for 8 years instead of 4. But they seem to be coming back to some level of normalcy, even if it is a normalcy that's not good for the country. And that's a good thing anyway. They're not worrying me nearly as much right now as they did 2 weeks ago. Shadowman says, drop a tooth, individuals adjusting to the massive change in whatever direction it takes them. Yeah. Blazer 101 says, Democrats will cheat in 2022 and 2024 with the mail-in ballots. It will be over for the Republicans. Again, it may well be, but the problem is you're not going to get them to change it. That requires legislation. And if you're a Democrat, why in the world would you want to change anything from that? I don't know what the Republicans do. other than try to put try to take advantage of it, try to make it hurt the Democrats. It's really the only thing I can think of. Sorry about that. If Trump doesn't put a stop to this now, I don't think there's anything Trump can do. I don't think there's anything Trump can do at this point. What I can't think of anything. I mean, what do you do? You can't just unilaterally, say, okay, that's an end to mail-in voting. That is something that requires legislation. And at the federal level, certainly, the Democrats, they have the House, they have the presidency, or, well, right now, they have the House, they don't have the Senate, and, Republicans have the presidency. But I don't see they're not going to change it right now. I mean, there's no way the House is going to go along with that. So they're not going to change it. I don't quite know how you do it other than trying to take advantage of what the Democrats have done, only make it worse. And don't get caught. That's the biggest thing. Because unlike this, where the press is out, propagandizing for the guys on the left, they would obviously be out to get anyone on the Republican side that they could find that pulled this stuff. But that's the only thing I can think of. That's the only thing I can think of, is go out and do the exact same thing and try to hurt the Democrats because of it. What about the courts? Well, there isn't anything on the side of the courts to get involved in. You have to have a case. And while I can go and say, all of this stuff with, the voting itself, particularly mail-in voting, have a nasty, nasty series of big attack vectors. I can look at those voting machines, the ones that are at issue, and I can look at what my, the various tests that my colleagues have gone into, and they look really, 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 really hackable. But can I prove that happened? No, I can't. I can just say, well, if I'm some guy with a bit of security training, right? And this is always true. If just sitting around musing about something, if I can figure out a way that I could attack it, there are people out there, groups and people, who have thought of this too and are attempting to do it right now. If I can think of it, somebody has already done it. Drop It True says, anyway, with respect to courts, there's just nothing here to adjudicate. You need some kind of actual case, and I don't see where you can prove that this was done. Would I say I'd be shocked if it wasn't? Absolutely, I would. I'd be shocked if it wasn't, used for voter fraud. All of these various attack vectors are just waiting for us, screaming, "Go and use me!" But can I prove it in court? Probably not. Probably not. Drop It 2 says the USA will reunite with NATO under Biden and be the new NWO Rottweiler. Well, then Biden will swarm your borders with illegals. Bingo, the Democrats have their totalitarian dictatorships along democracy. I don't think that's necessarily true. You're getting into a place where I have a hard time, just evaluating it. How do you evaluate when people are saying, like George Soros is doing this, that, or the other thing, or at the the world level there's something going on, intending to restructure our governments, because you see there's two things going on. One is it would involve just a crap ton of people, and somebody's going to spill the beans. It's why I don't think 9/11 was an inside job, because to do that the way that it happened would mean weeks in advance. It would mean weeks in advance of intentionally cutting structural members throughout the building. That means a lot of people involved. And that means somebody's going to spill the beans. I mean, somebody's going to have an attack of conscience, or they're going to be in a bar drowning their sorrows, which, if they did this, would certainly be included. So somebody will eventually spill the beans, and you can't. It's not like It's not like the mafia. If you told me the mafia had brought down the Twin Towers, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I can see that. I can see the mafia being able to keep this quiet. But I don't see the average person being able to keep it quiet. Somebody would spill the beans somewhere. But the other thing when you get into something like a world government is, as I've said a million times on this show, inside of every single politician in the United States, from your local city council person all the way up in the U.S. to the federal government, every last one of them are power-mad, sociopathic narcissists. They want to be running everything. Now, if it could be maneuvered around so that Joe Biden wound up being emperor of Earth, I think that he would take advantage of that. However, if it turns out that somebody else in some other country gets to be emperor of the Earth in this big thing, I don't see them going for it, because each and every one of them individually is a power-mad, sociopathic narcissist. They're not going to willingly say, okay, yes, I'm going to give up some potential power of mine. I'm going to give up some real power of mine that I have right now, and I'm going to hand it off to some, worldwide agency, and I'm going to lose my power. I don't see that happening. I see them fighting tooth and nail to keep their power. And so if it looks like there's some federal thing a world government thing going on, they're not going to like that. They're not going to like that at all. They're going to fight it tooth and nail. So I don't worry about that too terribly much. I really don't. Not that part of it. Let's see. Drop 2 says maybe it's time to move to Australia when international travel is restored, or Brazil. Either way, you can't have a superpower outside of the NWOUN. Been saying that for ages. Well, I don't know. I ain't going anywhere, I don't think. After I've got some other stuff that needs to be taken care of here for the next probably several years. Needs to be taken care of. I don't have any big giant. I don't have any plans to go anywhere. It's gone through my mind a few times, but I have too much of South Dakota prairie in my blood, where I'm going to retire to ultimately will be prairie land more than anything else. But when you talk about dictatorships and stuff like that, for me, you still get into this place where to get there from here, you're still looking at someone currently who has power and is a power-mad sociopathic narcissist who wants to be emperor of the world. They don't like sharing that with people. They don't like it at all. That's why they spend all of their time right now doing nothing but trying to acquire and maintain as much personal power as they possibly can. What about the all eyewitnesses and whistleblowers? Are you talking about 9/11? I worked for a company that had an office in 9/11, in One World Trade Center on 9/11. It was a very weird day for me because I had for years joked that I would know about the nuclear apocalypse by virtue of various equipment all over Chicago and other places that I was responsible for suddenly paging me. So we get to 9/11, and oddly enough, it didn't page me, not right away. I went downstairs, had a shower, went downstairs. My ex said to me, "Wow, you got to see this." So I look at it and go, "Wow, that's weird. I wonder I haven't been paged." So I went to work, which is about 5-10 minutes drive, got out of the car, and as I walked towards the building, that's when I got paged. Apparently what had happened was the uninterruptible power supply that we had there did its job and kept the equipment having electricity, and apparently whatever cabling went down from there, it stayed functional for a good hour or so after the first impact. So our people there were above the impact area, and they had to make it down through some pretty gory conditions, if I understand correctly, but they all made it out alive. The thing is, by virtue of having all kinds of equipment in there, I was not up on everything going on in the building, but if it pertained to power or network connectivity for us, I knew all about it. So I know what people were doing to some extent prior to that. They had one instance where they shut down the building, and that made everybody after the fact go, oh, it's because they went through and they cut all the structural members. I'm like, no, that could take weeks to cut all those structural members. But I knew exactly what was happening. They were dropping power at certain parts of the building repeatedly throughout the day, and it was going to impact us because they're dropping power. But when you're dropping power like that, usually it means you're going through and, I don't know, fixing wiring, putting in new wiring, things like that. It wasn't anything unusual. So when you get to whistleblowers and eyewitnesses, I'd have to see exactly what they have to offer. Most of the time, the people that I've seen, you can debunk a lot of what they're talking about. So for me, ultimately, it comes down to what can you prove scientifically? And I don't know that anybody has proved to me scientifically that it makes sense for it to have been an inside job in the way that people think about it. Is it an event that was taken by government and used? Absolutely. That's what they always do. Anytime that you get scared, that's when they take away your liberty, and that's when they start to do things. Excuse me. And then they take advantage of the whole situation and, put all kinds of security measures in place that really don't secure anything, like airport security theater. It doesn't secure a damn thing. So do they use those incidents? Absolutely. But do they necessarily become involved? I don't think so. There's too many people who might talk, and doing it requires a long-term commitment over a period of months to get it to happen. Hey, Larry, hail Stone Cold Bill Stone. Well, thank you very much. I hope it isn't true. I hope I'm wrong on this issue. History will prove me right. I hope not. It's just when I look at things like, world governments, I just look at my existing one, and I can't imagine anybody sitting, who I have ever voted for or have ever seen at the federal level who wants to share their power. Will they share power when it's in their best interest to do so in the short term? Absolutely they will. If they have to share power briefly, they'll do it if it looks like they can get more of it later. And they don't have very far, they're not able to think very far into the future either. They really only think until the next election, and that's about all. Blazer 101 says, Bill, was Building 7 a conspiracy? No, I don't think anything was going on with Building 7 unusually. I think what really happened there is, as always, nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. And what really happened there was the idiots at the BBC called that building as having collapsed before it did. Now you can say, oh, they had some kind of inside information and we were going off a script. Or you can say nothing you say in the press is real, because they can't get stuff right even when they're trying. I'm going to show you later tonight an instance where they were trying and they did get it right. A very unusual circumstance. So unusual that I thought I had to bring it to people's attention. But if you just say, okay, how often are these guys right? They know themselves they're not right that often. They will laugh if you talk about anything like a breaking story having been correct. It's always wrong. So if you look at it from that perspective, I just say this idiot's got it wrong again. What a shock. Middle of a breaking story, they got facts wrong. But unfortunately, because they did that, it spurred all kinds of conspiracy hypotheses. And I don't think there was anything going on there. I think the building ultimately fell. You don't have to get it as hot as people talk about to get the building to fall. You don't have to melt the steel. You just have to get it hot enough so that it no longer holds its cohesion. And if you want to look at this, I'll see if I can't do it after I'm done here, but I'll find it on YouTube. There's a great video. A guy who's a blacksmith who finally had it with, conspiracy hypotheses about how Building 7 couldn't have, or any of the buildings couldn't have fallen because it wasn't hot enough. So he goes and gets a steel girder, right? An actual steel girder. And he says, this is what was used in the World Trade Center. Here we go. and he sticks it in his furnace for a long time, and it starts to get, not where it's melted, but to the point where you can take it and bend it easily, bend it back and forth. No melting involved, but you can bend it to your heart's content. Obviously, that's not going to hold a building up. And I have a friend, oldest friend in the world, who is, among other things, he was a mechanical engineer. He worked for Boeing for a number of years. And after 9/11 happened, I called him and said, dude, this looks like it was a controlled demolition. What do you think? And he said, well, just looking at it and what I'm hearing, I would have to say that probably the way they're talking about it is accurate. It pancaked itself. It was a miracle that didn't, tip over. But when he tells me something like that, I usually agree with. I just say, okay, he's the engineer. He's the guy who has, actually been before court as an expert witness. I will take what he says as absolute gospel. Let's see. Drop Truth says informational compartmentalization. It worked on the Manhattan Project. Yes, but the Manhattan Project was very, very small. Very, very small. Comparatively. To bring down the World Trade Centers in a controlled fashion would have required weeks, maybe months, of going into that gigantically tall building and going through structural members and cutting through them. There's just no way that could be done in secret. Even if you compartmentalized it, you'd still have guys going in there with those gigantic metal saws. And because I've seen it, if you watch videos of when they're preparing to drop these things, and you watch it and you just go, how would you get that many people in there to do that work? And the less people that you have, the longer it's going to take. Or it's just, at some level, it starts to become highly unlikely to me because of too many people involved. Somebody would have to have had a fit of conscience or just got drunk. Larry says Australia is a prison again. Yeah, I'm kind of glad I'm not there right now. I'm waiting for, when Biden takes office to see how nasty he gets things. Excuse me, attempted to breathe water. Drop Truth, who's from Australia. Jeez, there it is again. Anyway, Drop Truth is from Australia, is saying the cities are getting that way, yes. Rural areas, countryside where you live is quite self-reliant. Yes, we worry about China. Our politicians have sold much of Australia to them. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we've had that so much here. Most of what you see here is things like movies and businesses that want to be catering to the Chinese because there's a lot of money to be had by that many billion people. So, Drop 2 says Chinese have just bought an island in White Sundays. I think that's what it is, or Whit Sundays, not sure. Closed the airport and sent the tourists home. They also own the Port of Darwin on a 99-year lease. Holy frack. Jeez. Drop 2 is also saying, it was to Blazer 101, it was declared so by the BBC, when they said Building 7 collapsed when it was all upright in the newscast. Silverstein said, pull it can mean something other than what they're talking about in terms of it being some kind of slang for dropping the building. There are any number of things that could have meant. I assume in that case it meant get the guys out of there because it's in danger of collapsing. Or the fire hazard was too much. Get the people out. That's probably what they mean. I mean, really. I don't think, and as I say, the BBC one, I don't think there's any kind of conspiracy there. You're just looking at the usual crappy job that our press worldwide does. They got the facts wrong, as usual. That one just screams at me, oh, what a shock, they got the facts wrong. And it's really too bad they have, because it has fueled all kinds of conspiracy hypotheses. Drop 2 says, I firmly disagree, Bill, about World Trade Center Building 7. Airline fuel doesn't burn hot enough. Again, I'll find that guy who is blanking on it, is a blacksmith. I'll find you his video. It doesn't have to burn that hot. It just has to burn hot enough for the steel to lose its cohesion and be enough to bend. And he shows it to you right there. Larry asks, can my friend get me a 747? No, I don't think so. Maybe one that fell out of the sky. He could maybe get you a part from it. That was his job. He was a forensic engineer. Anytime a plane fell out of the sky, or if they did testing or that sort of thing, they'd take him to a big hangar where all the pieces are, and he's the guy that gets to figure out why it fell out of the sky, or was. He's now retired. Drop 2 says, don't need to pre-cut the steel beam. Nanothermite iron oxide would burn at greater than 3,000 degrees. Well, again, you have to get somebody to place it, and you have to place it a lot of places. That isn't something that one person can do in the dead of night. This is going to require time, and it's going to require personnel. And somebody is going to spill the beans. If you got like me, and you hired me to go do some stuff, and I'm getting in there, and I'm putting nanothermite. If I'm running around putting nanothermite on all the on structural members, and then one day on September 11th, the building comes down in what looks like a controlled fashion that could have happened by virtue of my putting thermite on various things, I'm going to spill the beans. I'm going to spill the beans big time, because I'm going to feel seriously used by this. Even if you don't tell me what I'm working on, I'm going to be able to put 2 and 2 together. Let's see. I was working on this building in a way that could bring it down, and then it came down. I wonder if these two things are hooked together. There's too many people, and you can't tell them all to shut up. I mean, you couldn't even threaten me. You could not threaten me enough to get me to shut up. You could send the CIA after me, and I'd say, fine, you're going to have my dead body, but by God, I'm going to tell if I possibly can. And in fact, I would come up with a plan to do that. I've often said that I think that while Edward Snowden did a great service for this country, he did it wrong. He should have had a plan. I worked out how he could do it, and get away with it. But he should have had a plan such that he didn't end up in Russia. That was the worst place to be. He could have done it, and if he'd planned it right, he could have done it in a totally different way, gotten away with it, and nobody would have been the wiser. And all of the information that we're getting out there would be gotten out on a torrent, via BitTorrent. And he would have gotten away with it, and nobody would have known who did it, and by the time they figured out if they had, it wouldn't have mattered because he had disappeared. That's certainly a possibility. And if you got me, if I'm putting 2 and 2 together, and I say, screw this, I'm going to talk, you could be damn sure that I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that they never find me. So can my friend send me a 747? No, he cannot. He cannot send me one either. Wouldn't mind having one. Drop 2 says you don't need to pre-cut the steel. Talked about that. Yeah, Larry says NBA gets millions from China. DOT, Department of Transportation. Not sure what you mean there. Oh, well, you're talking about the 747. Yes. Yeah, they all of these companies, even if they don't own something outright in the United States, they are still being pandered to. God, are they being pandered to? In a way that, as an American, is very irritating for me. I had hoped that, YouTube, and now I'm having to look at other services, but I'd hoped that YouTube, being what it was originally, might help break up the monopoly that they have in Hollywood on all of our entertainment. It was one of the reasons that, as a fan of Emma Blackery, I was happy to see her be getting some level of success, because she was doing it by virtue of being a personality on YouTube. I'd like to see more of that, but unfortunately YouTube has changed what its focus is and changed what it is, such that it really doesn't deserve the term YouTube anymore. It's not the same thing as it was when it first started out. Drop of truth. Oh, you're a fire retardation specialist. Oh, who worked on Victoria Station 51 weeks and Paddington Station 24 weeks in London. Oh, you also have some knowledge in explosive demolition and destruction by heat or pressure. I will always bow to the expertise of someone who is an expert. Well, don't know what to tell you. Again, it's hard for me to come to terms with the notion that there's giant conspiracies, but I will believe you if you're talking about anything having to do with your area of expertise. It's just for me, when you get into conspiracies, when you get into ones that would be really large, like this one would be. I've been to that building twice, and it's ginormous. It's a ginormous building. The number of people who would have to be involved would be, I don't know how many, hundreds maybe. And even if you didn't do it with that many, then you're stretching it all out a very long period of time, because if you got 100 people working on it, you're going to get this much done. One person working on it, they're going to have this much to do. So you're going to stretch out the time significantly, and the more time that you have, the more likely it is that somebody is going to, figure it out. That is the problem with conspiracies in general. When they get to beyond a certain size, you're talking about a level of unpredictability. Somebody like me is going to want to spill the beans. Not an expert, you say, but very knowledgeable. Well, clearly more knowledge than I. I only have what I can, personally deal with, which is very little. Some stuff I've seen on YouTube, just depends. I always have to be careful about videos on YouTube. It has to be, like I'm going to talk about later with the oddly good example of journalism. Very weird. But I don't remember where I was going with it. Oh well. But yeah, it's oddly enough, it was a good piece. I remember where I was going with it. When you look at YouTube videos, I still have to look at them from the perspective of Heinlein's Fair Witness, which was, I'm sure people watching me have seen it, but if you're a new viewer, Robert A. Heinlein he is called the master from time to time in science fiction. He was an amazing, prolific science fiction author who had a lot of really cool ideas. One of the ideas he had was for a fictional profession that he used in his book, A Stranger in a Strange Land, which won a Hugo for a reason. And so this profession was a fair witness. Now, fair witnesses did not make any kind of assumptions about anything at all. They simply watched things and reported what they watched. So, for example, if you were to ask a fair witness what color is the house across the street, they would say it's white on this side, because they don't make assumptions about the rest of the house being white. They can only see that side, so that's what they say. So if you walk them around to another side and it's white, they'll say it's white on this side. But it only applies to when they're personally watching it. So you can watch them all the way around a white house, and they will still not assume that the other walls that a fair witness cannot personally look at right now, they will not make any assumptions that wall didn't spontaneously turn green. So when you get to YouTube videos, a lot of them don't pass that test for me. I try to come at it like a fair witness. I'm like, okay, where is the incontrovertible evidence? Not just people saying it could have gone down that way, but people who can say, yes, I know for a fact that it went down a certain way. When you get into hypotheses and different ways things could happen, again, I have to look at it from a fair witness mode. Is there something in here that I can grab onto and say this is absolutely factual? Not somebody's opinions, not somebody any testimony or things like that, but I mean the actual scientific evidence, presented by somebody who does have some kind of standing in the scientific field we're talking about. But it doesn't. A lot of videos do not pass that test for me. They don't pass the test of I'm a fair witness coming at this. What can I see? Well, I can see somebody with an opinion. I can see somebody who's done a lot of interesting editing. But what I don't see is, the absolute concrete, proof that what they're talking about is real. I just see a lot of people talking as opposed to being a lot of factual stuff that you can definitely verify being behind it. Drop True says, for example, thermite can only be ignited by a magnesium fuse, a high voltage pulse of sufficient heat, possibly with a detonator. You can build me a taser too. Well, hopefully I won't need one, but it depends. But depends what probably President Biden does, whether I'll actually need one or not. Always be prepared. Better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. That is a pretty accurate statement. So, anyway, that's where I think we're at with our politics now, as we're just going back to what we had before 4 years ago, which is a lot of people who are generally afraid to do much of anything. Either it'll have some impact, some immediate impact on their power, or they just don't want to do anything that might them eventually someday maybe get them in trouble with their voters. Or maybe, the intelligence people have something on them. I don't know. But we're not going to see any more senatorial committee hearings on social media. Not going to hear any on the press, and I'm not sure what you do with that anyway, because under the First Amendment, those people can say anything they want. The best thing you can do is point out that they're completely full of crap most of the time. And it's just going to be more of the same for the rest of my previous lifetime. With Trump, as disruptive as he was, there was at least a chance to maybe change something in government. Now that, just forget it. There's no way. Hey, Shadow Man, you're back. Neighbor lighting wood on fire with gasoline at your building. Gasoline, huh? You might be interested. There's a YouTuber, I think his name is Uncle Bob, and he hasn't posted much for a long time, but man, Uncle Bob used to have some fun stuff that he'd do with gasoline. He'd like one time he had a portable stereo radio cassette tape thing, and he took it and he got a big giant barrel of gasoline, right? Put a giant barrel of gasoline, drops the thing into it as deep as he can get it, then goes back and plugs it in, which of course causes this giant explosion. Most of which went straight up, He's got that for a whole bunch of stuff. It's very, very funny. I think his name is Uncle Bob. I'll see if I can't find a link to his channel, but he's hysterical. He's absolutely hysterical. Shadow Man, not going to live in fear? Nope, me neither. Drop Truth says, time to move. Shadow Man, stay safe, my friend. Absolutely. We are all cool video on Twitter done in a fire pit. Oh, that's cool. Shoot me. I'm at SYL Tales there. Shoot me a link. I'd love to look at it. I love blowing things up, One of these 4th of July, maybe next one, I'll drive up to South Dakota where good fireworks are legal. Take me about 3 hours to get there. But excuse me, but I'll drive up to South Dakota because they have good fireworks there. Because there's lots of space to fire them off, so who cares? But they have this thing that is a series of what amounts to firecrackers in series, right? And they roll up into kind of a flat spiral thing about this big, and otherwise flat. It's supposed to go on a nail that would sit on a post or something like that. But I tried it that way once. What's supposed to happen is the propellant here is supposed to spin the whole thing while it all goes off. Well, that doesn't work. So what you do instead is you put 2 or 3 on a pile in the middle of the street, and light them, and you have one of the biggest sets of explosions I've ever seen. Someday I'm going to get it so I can put a video of it exploding on my YouTube channel. Maybe next year I'll slip up to South Dakota and pick some good fireworks up. Speaking of which, South Dakota. I couldn't believe it. South Dakota, this last election, made marijuana legal. Couldn't believe it. I have said a million times that if that ever happened, I was going to go to my family and petition them to allow me to use the family ranch land to do one crop. Sell it to the bikers on their way to and back from Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. Make so much money, I am filthy rich, and goodbye. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that South Dakota had done that. Now, they have some stuff they're doing because, of course, they didn't just make it legal to do. I think probably your average person, if they started, growing weed in their backyard now, is going to, nobody's going to care. But things like growers, licenses to sell them, so all of that would need to be in place. But they're talking about that within the next year or two. I could be doing this from out there in a couple of years. I could be doing this from out there and just watching it so I can get rich. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. Let's see. Drop 2 says, I had visions of Portland, Oregon for a moment. Man, I don't think that. Shadowman says, Bill, are there more people moving there from the big cities to your locale? No, not at all. Not that I've noticed. They don't even know we exist. They really don't. I mean, in addition to all of the, people I've talked to and seen and stuff. I mean, I was on a live stream. I was not on the stream, but I was watching a live stream from a guy in Los Angeles. Asked where people were from. I said, Lincoln, Nebraska. He said, wow, that's just, middle of bumfrack nowhere. And I said, no, actually, it's a city of about 320,000. We're about a half an hour away from a city of 1 million. And he was absolutely stunned that these places existed. So I don't think they even know, and I don't think they'd come here if they did. They consider us, to be various kinds of hicks and rubes. So, let's see. Dalton says, South Dakota legalized weed before New York. That's insane. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I really didn't think I was ever going to be able to go to my family and say, hey, what do you say we grow some weed and we get really, really, really rich at the time of the Sturgis Rally. I never thought I would be able to even ask. I always said that, and I thought, well, it'll never happen. I was floored. I was absolutely floored. I've got a golden ticket. I've got a golden chance to make my way. All right, let's see. Shadowman says, drop of truth, you're in a purple area in California. Yeah, California, I mean, really the only big, nasty blue area is San Diego to San Francisco, and drop out some other parts in between San Diego and San Francisco, or Los Angeles and San Francisco. I've been there, and I'm sure there's a lot of red voters there. Drop 2 says, the best, most powerful explosives are made with nitric acid. Not easy to get nowadays, but easy enough to make. Shadowman is asking, is weed legal where I am? No, I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. However, my heart has always been with South Dakota. I was born there. Spent summers when I was growing up there from about age of 5 to 15, anywhere between 2 weeks and a month. And kind of have my it's kind of in my bones. But they legalized it. And amazingly enough, right, here I am in a city that's a giant college town. It's like 30,000 students at UNL. And admittedly, well, most of them can vote in Nebraska because most of them are Nebraskans. I mean, you're going to find some people who come out, but most of them can vote. And, we've got University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Omaha, there's University of Nebraska Omaha. Here in Lincoln, we have 3 other colleges and universities. And then you get into 2-year colleges and universities. And somehow, despite the fact that a huge percentage of these students all smoke weed, they haven't been able to get it to go across on their ballot yet. I think maybe what happened in South Dakota, maybe what happened was they finally figured out that there's a giant cash crop to be had from it, and decided that, the ranchers said this stuff actually grows around here. It's not like almost anything else that won't. The natural prairie for a reason. But it'd be a huge cash crop because it would. I mean, they used to grow hemp out there, and in World War II, and it still grows. We call it ditchweed. So, I mean, maybe the ranchers just said, hey, wait a minute, there's a whole crap ton of money to be had in here in this. But apparently, to my surprise, they're not quite as conservative as I thought they were. Let's see. Job 2 says purple, Freemasonic, temple, Catholic. Don't get the reference. Yeah, blue and red makes purple. What they're saying there is what they do on the things when they're doing videos on news where they're suggesting how people are going to vote. They go, okay, well, we can count on our huge metro areas to vote, Democrat. And then you get out into some places like the suburbs, and you start to get redder the farther you get out of the suburbs. But there's an in-between area, say in one congressional district, where you can say, okay, well, maybe 50-50, so they say it's purple. That's all that means. They can't call it really 50-50 or something like that. So say, it's not quite blue, it's not quite red. Shadow Man says, to drop the truth, a purple zone has evenly distributed number of conservatives and liberals, usually moderates from both. Yeah. Color of a bruise. yeah, that goes. Well explained. Well, thank you very much, Shadow Man. I do my best. I was a teacher at one point. Some of it rubbed off, not a lot. Okay, well, as I say, the weird thing about, kind of getting back to normal with politics is that it means there's less for me to say about politics. And I'm not sure what that means. I may just finally be able to, for the first time in several years, finally be able to sit down and just do some science fiction for a while. With occasional politics thrown in, because unfortunately these days you can't not do it. When you intentionally, like for Batwoman, hire an actress who is, a lesbian specifically so you can tell people how woke you are with your show. And she's a terrible actress. And it turns out that any of us who critique her on the basis of her acting, they say, oh, you're doing it because she's a lesbian. So we can't get away from it. But it may be that I may start to do more science fictional stuff, because ultimately, when you're back in the same old mode that's been my entire life, you still got the same things that I'm going to say over and over again. And once, I'm not one of those people on YouTube who I found a niche by bitching about one thing, and so I'm going to keep bitching. I was like, well, you want to see my standing on the problem with U.S. medical care and its cost. Well, I got a video about that. I have a whole series of videos on education. I have a series of videos on gun control and why it's such a bad idea. I have a whole series of videos on stuff that I like I've talked about, but I don't get it. I mean, there's very little left for me to talk about. When you go into same old mode, it's like, okay, look at my video over here. Look at my video over here. I have nothing else to say about it. Am I ever going to do a panel? I would like to. It's just a question of both getting people who are interested would be interesting, and getting it to work technically. It's not impossible. It's just I should. You're absolutely right. But you see how many people call in here. So okay. Speaking of science fiction, let us talk okay. Let me get out my secondary monitor here and go back and see if it looks okay there. Wait for my secondary monitor. Sorry. That's what happens when you're live. Okay, it looks all right. Let me know if my audio is still dropping out. I found out one week that it would drop out when I hit this card, but then if I go back to it a second time, everything's good. Now it's fine. Thank you. Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so there were 2 episodes, one last week and one this week. We're down into our area where I can only talk about these things in terms of how bad they are. You know, you have my scale, which is 1, existentially, threateningly bad. You could die from watching it. Up to 5, which is passable. Neither of these episodes hit anything like passable. 2s as a rule. You know, the interesting thing about these episodes is I am always hoping it's somebody who can stomach watching the show for that long a period of time. I hope that what happens is somebody will do a fan edit of each season. And I think it'll drop down to a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours, if you get rid of all the crap. And both of these last 2 episodes have so little going on in them that actually makes any damn sense that it's just crap. You know, that you could leave these episodes out. If you're doing that, 2 to 3 hour fan edit of the season, both of these episodes could be left out. Just completely left out. There's very, very little that happens that actually moves the general arc of the plot on, trying to find out what happened with the burn. Hey, Marshall. Period to you as well, I guess. I don't know what's going on with my voice here. So anyway, like I say, these 2 episodes you really could have just forgotten about. You could just forget about them, get rid of them completely, and you would never need them to further the plot whatsoever. Not as maybe a few lines of dialogue here or there, but not much. So, okay, things that worked in last week's episode. I'm going to probably be a real minority here. But as a Star Trek concept goes, I am okay with the unification of the Romulans and the Vulcans and even changing the name of the planet. I am okay with that. What surprises me is that the Romulans and Vulcans didn't unify when it made sense. The time that it made sense was after the supernova that destroyed the Romulan Empire, essentially. That would have been the time, the Star Trek Picard era. But we can't do that in that era because they have to be, coming down and whacking us over the head about, Orange Man bad or getting out of EU bad, which is what they wanted to be talking about in that. But if you... I don't remember where I was necessarily going, but the again, it's not something that I'm against the idea of. It's just like why didn't it happen way back when? And then of course you have that deal where they showed Spock for a couple of 10 seconds or so, and so they decided to name this episode after the 2 episodes in which Spock appeared in Star Trek The Next Generation. But as we know, if you have watched that episode, no one who was there recorded Spock saying anything. It's like one of those deals where sometimes I'm going to talk about one that I actually liked. You say, okay, these guys have watched at least some Star Trek, but apparently not enough. Let me get back to you about that with Trump's strategy. I don't see it going anywhere, frankly, but so the part that worked for me in terms of last week's episode, if you're going to take that as a story possibility where you're getting the Vulcans and the Romulans together, they did a call sideways that I very much liked. And that call sideways was, we now call Vulcan Ni'Var. Okay, here's the thing, right? And this is why I'm a secret master of fandom and you're not. And that is because Ni'Var actually comes from way, way, way back in fandom. You can see a link to it. I've got a link to it in my description box where it talks about where the word Ni'Var came from on Wikipedia. I'm not Wikipedia, but Memory Alpha, which is a wiki for Star Trek trivia. So here's what it has to say. I'll just read it here as written on the on Memory Alpha. Ni'Var was a term coined circa 1967 by linguist Dorothy Jones, who wrote the Dorothy and My Fanway series of Star Trek stories for the fanzine T-Negative in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The word literally means to form and was an art form practiced on Vulcan in which a subject was examined from two different viewpoints or in terms of it having two different aspects or nature. Ni'Var poetry and art were printed in Spacanalia, which is a fanzine, and other fanzines, and the term actually became part of a sophisticated Vulcan language invented by Ms. Jones. Again, this is circa 1967. But it caught on like wildfire in the Star Trek community. I'm aware of this because Ni'Var was also the name of a novella originally entitled The Thousandth Man by Claire Gabriel, which was cut down to a short story length for publication, and this is how I got it, in the 1976 anthology Star Trek The New Voyages. Let's see, in the story, it was, quote, a Vulcan term referring to the duality of things, two who are one, two diversities that are unity, two halves that come together to make a whole. And Leonard Nimoy talks about that in the introduction to the short story. It seemed likely that the ship of that name, which there was, they called a ship of this name in the Star Trek episode Shadows of P'Jem, Star Trek Enterprise episode. The episode co-writer, Mike Sussman, has said that, in fact, the starship Ni'Var was indeed an homage to that short story that was published in Star Trek The New Voyages. And so it was clearly got from that. So whether or not they got that term Ni'Var from, if they knew where it came from or not, it's still a pretty cool use of the word. It is a good callback. That is a good callback. Because if it has a deeper meaning than just, being a ship on Star Trek Enterprise. It has a word. It is a word that makes sense. Under those circumstances where you're going to reunify the Vulcans and Romulans, that makes sense. And I'm down with that. I'm okay with it. If you're going to do that, I'm down with it. Marshall says, the comm badges auto-record anything discussed with an ambassador. That's your story and you're sticking with it. Yeah. Drop2 says, what's Trump strategy in your estimation? Please elucidate. Let me get out of this. I'm going to ask Marshall. So let me get out of this and back to my other card here with the politics section on it. So I was actually down with that. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why it hadn't happened right after the sun exploded. But I was down with that. I was down with that as an idea. Not necessarily down with it in terms of execution. For example, what the hell is with Burnham's mother? It was a really big deal last season. She was talking about how she's been looking for her mother. And then just finds her there on Vulcan hanging out. Okay. What she didn't care. There was no emotion like you would have expected, given what we've seen so far, which I guess is a good thing, because as always, both of these episodes, they're, as always, doing something and then slamming the brakes so we can have some talk about our feelings and, stuff that just doesn't matter very much, that adults deal with without having to whine about it every 5 minutes with somebody. That has got to be something of a generational thing here, because I can't stand it because of the constant whining, the constant crying. I'm used to Starfleet officers who have problems personally, but take care of it on their own time. They don't bring it with them to work. And so, and that's what's happening most of the time. They're bringing it to work. Yeah, Shadow Man says, I can't get past the bad science. Yeah, what science? Yeah. Shadow Man says, 900-year-old Starfleet people walking around like it happens every day. It's dumb. You lose IQ points just watching Discovery. Yeah. I think Marshall said it probably the best, which is it's decent enough science fiction. It's just really crappy Star Trek. And it's not good science in places like you said. It continues to be not very good. Just not very good. As always, just not very good. And today's episode, stuff that really didn't work, which really surprised me, because they've got more money than God. The thing that surprised me on today's episode was you can now start to see bad green screening. I was floored, because I keep my eye for my green screen, right? Because if you look over on this side, sometimes the top of this chair being green, a darker green than the green screen behind me, sometimes the top of that chair will disappear depending on my background and my lighting. So I sort of have, watched myself enough times that I have this eye for the green screen. And I don't know about anybody else, but I could see the green screen behind them. Typically when they were inside of, someone's home or something like that. But I could see the green screens right there. They were real obvious to me. And I'm like, why do we have that? We have more money than God on this show. Why should we ever have to worry about a crappy green screen? Shadow Man, let's see, I already said that around it. Yeah, and I was thinking about it. Because I don't have a hell of a lot to say about these episodes. They're the usual dumb. They get both of them about a 2 out of me. The Nivar thing worked, but that was about it. There were a couple of things that just plain out didn't work, but most of the time it's just the usual. Okay, we're whining to each other. We could take this out of the episode and not have a problem with anything. I think too what they're doing now in terms of the I think they are trying to alter the way that they're telling the stories. It used to be you had to watch all 10 episodes of the season so that you could get the entire story. Well, we're getting to a place now where you can do that, but where we kind of still need to do that to get the whole story. But they're now starting to make certain things more episodic. That's a good thing. I've said over and over, if they wanted to do it the way that they do for Doctor Who, that would be great. Because Doctor Who has an overall arc for the season, and generally an overall arc for the Doctor himself or herself. But you can still watch individual episodes and not have to see all of them to get a particular story. So it seems like they're making stuff a little bit more episodic. Now, of course, like everybody else, I've occasionally... Yes, Shadow Man, they use Shutterstock footage in the season finale of Picard, just laughable. They have more money than God. Why can't you do something? So like everybody else, I've probably at various points in time sat down and said to myself, how could I fix this? How if I was the producer, if I got in there and I fired Alex Kurtzman because he's a talentless hack, and I was coming in there, how would I fix this? If I've already talked about one way I'd fix it, which is shut everything down that they're currently doing and restart it a certain way with time travel. But, okay, if you're not going to do that, if you were going to have this series in the first place, what would you do with it? Drop2 says, company is coming. Yep, all the best. Fun show. Thank you very much. Cast me on demand. So if I was going to do this show from the beginning, and I wanted to be decent, and I wanted to go into it with the mindset knowing, because I wouldn't really want to have the Federation fall, but we, make it far enough in the future, I guess. So if it was me doing this, I would not have had the series start where it did. That was just dumb on so many levels. I would have started it, I don't know, 26th, 27th century, something like that. Because if you did that, then you wouldn't need to make the Klingons look like orcs. You could make them you could have orc-like aliens that you're fighting, but you don't need to make them look like orcs. You don't have to have all of your technology matching. You don't have to screw up previous continuity. You can go your own way. That would have been what I was, the way I would have started it out, is well after Star Trek: The Next Generation. And then if I was going to go and say, okay, we're going to go into a future after 2 years, we'll go into a future where the Federation's all screwed up and we have to fix it. I would have then brought them forward 500, 600, 400 or so years and had it done it that way. Because, again, you're so far off into the future that you really don't need to worry about prior continuity beyond a certain point. And then I would have done something like this. For this season, instead of this irrationally trying to keep the crew together on the Discovery, even though it's Starfleet men, you have to expect to be, given orders to go where they want you to. But instead of doing that, instead of being crazy about it, just make it so that this season, they come forward in time. You eject all of that crap about Burnham having been there for a year, because you don't need that for the overall arc. You don't even need it for individual stories, particularly. So you just start in the future with this crew. They find Starfleet very quickly, and then Starfleet takes them and decides that, hey, it's been 800 some years. We need to train you up, which should be something on their minds. We need to train you up because you are totally out of step with modern technology. So what we're going to do is, this season, we will spend an episode or two on any individual character. They'll take them off the Discovery. Maybe middle of the season you can get the cast back, get the crew back on the Discovery for some emergency thing. But you just go with an individual cast member and go with them, whatever ship they may be going to, whatever ground assignment they may be going to, while they're getting retrained. You follow them doing that. And then at the end of the season, you can get them all back together, as I say, maybe the middle of the season. And now they have, they're familiar with what the current technology is and all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's what I probably would have done if I was going to have to make this show. Frankly, I was going to have to make this show. I would have put it up in the 30th or so century and used the idea that I came up with a long time ago. But, let's see. Marshall says, dot means previous comment didn't show on my screen. Oh, okay. Shot. Okay. Oh, I'm sure that. Romulan star is instantly replaced with another one before it goes. Problem solved. Yeah. Well, knowing his grasp of science, I'm quite sure that you could have gotten a script like that from our good friend Alex Kurtzman, that no talent hack. Anyway, that's what I would have done to try to fix this mess. I don't know what else you can do. I have one thing you can do. I've talked about it before. Generally, the concept is we're going to shut down everybody because they suck. We're going to shut them all down. You call me, Paramount calls me, or CBS calls me and said, Bill, we want you to run all of our Star Trek properties. Okay, here's what's happening. We're going to shut these two down. Put them away. Canceled. Bye-bye. It was good while it lasted. Here's your severance check. No more. Goodbye. So I'd start with doing that. And then I'd have a deal where we had a 2-hour TV movie, which would involve Captain, now President Archer, and maybe some other people from that era, and Crewman Daniels. He's back because what happened was the reason that our Star Trek Discovery and stuff is so much darker is because Section 31 got too powerful too quickly. So they have to go back in time, work with Archer to change history so that, since he's the president, good guy to talk to, change history so that Section 31 does not become very powerful at all. And then that just negates everything in Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek Discovery, and Star Trek Picard. Boom, they're just gone. Just poof, disappeared forever. And we go back to something that fans actually wanted to see these characters end up doing. So after that, I would take the next 11 weeks, I think, and I would take a 2-hour block of time on CBS's broadcast time, and I would broadcast Star Trek Continues in that time slot, that 2-hour time slot, as a limited series, 10, 11 episodes, I think. Just run Star Trek Continues in that slot. And then, after that's all over with, we do Star Trek Andromeda, which was an idea for a series for me that had a 5-year arc, and each season had its own arc and would have been very, very different. I'm not going to talk about it now because I've talked about it before, and maybe I'll talk about it again. But, Paramount, CBS, give me a call if you want something that's going to work, fans are going to want to watch, that's good science fiction that even non-fans will watch. Call me. I know how to do it. That no-talent hack that you've got running the show right now doesn't. Dalton says, I'm 26, has never watched Star Trek. Where should I start? I generally feel like you should start in air order. Start with the original series and then the original series cast movies up through about Star Trek 4. And then you start to get overlap with Star Trek The Next Generation, some of the original series cast movies. Kind of in that order, because you'll probably get more out of it that way. If you have to cut it, because I understand when you're talking about Star Trek, the original series in particular, and apparently it's starting to happen with Star Trek The Next Generation. You're looking at what happens always in science fiction, which is they always get the technology wrong. Every single time. There is no instance in science fiction of when they didn't get the technology wrong. So with Star Trek, the original series, and to some extent now Star Trek The Next Generation, I get it. Viewers your age have a difficult time dealing with the complete wrongness of Star Trek, the original series technology. I get that. Totally get it. I get that you guys are more removed in time from Star Trek, the original series, than I was from Flash Gordon serials when I started watching them, I guess in about the 70s or so. So I get it. It's tough for you to stay in the moment when you get jarred out of it by this. So a couple of things that I might suggest to you, if you watch nothing else of Star Trek, the original series, watch City on the Edge of Forever. It is arguably the best Star Trek episode from any part of the franchise, arguably the best one. And it's by an amazing author, Harlan Ellison, who's done a lot of work. Ended up having a giant beef with Gene Roddenberry, a lifelong giant beef with him over City on the Edge of Forever. But nevertheless, it is still one of the best episodes of Star Trek throughout all of them, if not the best. And it won't tend to jar you out of the moment the same way. There's maybe 10 minutes that takes place on the Enterprise, and then they're down, they go back in time to the 1930s. So it is actually a period piece from the 1930s, and because of that, you aren't jarred out. It's not this technology that got totally wrong and looks foolish from today's standpoint. You're looking at, technology from the 1930s that is historical, it's correct. So it doesn't jar you out the way that a lot of episodes tend to do. So I would definitely watch that one. I would definitely watch Mirror, Mirror. That is another good one. It's where the whole mirror universe in Star Trek began. You might want to watch, Errand of Mercy. That one is the first episode that ever had Klingons in it. They'll look very different from the Klingons that you see today. They didn't have the kind of makeup back then, didn't even think about it. So they look a lot more human, but to be honest, I think that's a good thing. I think when you are busy putting appliances over half or more of an actor's face, they can't act through it. To me, the best Klingons were the ones that looked more human because, John Colicos, great actor, Shakespearean actor, has done he did all kinds of things, and he played Commander Kur, the first Klingon captain that we ever saw. And he did it so well because he didn't have to act through all of this stuff. He looks absolutely menacing all the time. He seems, sort of evil and clever. And he can do that because, again, Shakespearean actor, and he can just act with his face. So if you watch the Errand of Mercy, you're going to find that in there. There's a number of others that are just considered, really good. In general, Star Trek: The Original Series, with the first season, again, you have to remember this is the first season of any Star Trek anywhere, so they were making up their universe as they went along. The first season, they were occasionally stumbling to find their way, not very frequently, but occasionally, and you'll find references to things that we don't ever hear or see from again in Star Trek, because they were kind of making it up as they went along, so they found something that worked and they went with that, rather than maybe something that was similar but didn't work. The first season, they were finding their legs just a little bit, but has some really good stories. Star Trek, The City on the Edge of Forever, is one that comes out of that. So is Errand of Mercy comes out of that season. Another good one to watch from first season is the Balance of Terror. Very good episode. Also the first time we see a Romulan. But like I say, first season they're finding their way a little bit. Generally pretty good stories. The second season they have definitely fallen into so they've got their groove. They stories there. It's like any other TV series. Pretty good hit to miss ratio on Star Trek. Some bad ones. But the second season they're in their groove, and stuff pretty much starts to become familiar to you. And again, some very good stories in there. One that immediately comes to mind is why am I blanking on it? A Journey to Babel. That's a good one, although it is a shipbound story that, as somebody who looks at these with 20/20 eyes, you may be taken out of a little bit. Amok Time, which is one where Spock has to go back for a wedding. A number of them, quite a number of them in second season are very good. You get to the third season, and that's where the creator, Gene Roddenberry, bowed out of production for a variety of reasons. But he bowed out of production, and when he bowed out, the episodes weren't nearly as good. Some of them are outright stupid. There's one called Spock's Brain. We would all like to forget that one. It's just dumb. Things like And the Children Shall Lead, which, near as I can tell, was a script designed to showcase Melvin Belly. He was an attorney, well-known one at that time. I think it was to showcase Melvin Belly's non-existent acting talents. There's episodes in there that have good aspects to them. There's episodes in there that are very, very good. But the hit-miss ratio is quite a lot worse for the third season of Star Trek. Okay. So, anyway, that's my Star Trek for the week. You could have forgotten about both these episodes in that big fan edit that I hope somebody will someday make just to show it can be done. They could have been ignored. I couldn't figure out why the Romulans and the Vulcans didn't reunite at an appropriate time, which would have been when Romulan star exploded. 2 out of 5, where 1 is existentially threateningly bad and 5 is passable. About a 2. I ain't paying for this stuff, that's for sure. Okay, let me take us back to another card here. Marshall, you were saying that you think you have Trump's strategy. I would be very curious to see what you have to say on Trump's strategy. Myself, I don't see it. I still don't see it getting to where he has 270. I'm not sure I even see him going to the House. And I'm not sure going to the House is anything we really want to do. If Trump got another term on the basis of the House having to choose him, I think the left would go insane. I think if there's any way that Trump wins this time around right now, the left is going to go insane. And they're going to want to get rid of the, God, I'm blanking. It's one of those nights. They're going to want to get rid of the Electoral College, although that'll be difficult to do. So, I mean, I don't want it to happen because I don't want anyone to be getting away with the amount of voter fraud that appears to have been occurring here. Oh, see you later, Shadow Man. Try to come back. Okay, good night. Great having you here. Thank you. Marshall is saying, 1, I'm making the same mistake he did and everyone in media is making. I'm thinking he's a politician. Actually, I'm not so much thinking about that. I'm just looking at, what's going on and how do you get to 270 from there? And I don't see a 270 from there. You still, even if he's not a politician, he still has to be able to prove things in court. Oh. Excuse me. Oh, man. I'll wait for a Marshall here. 2, Marshall says, he is a businessman. On top of that, he's in real estate, building, etc. He thinks in terms of 5-year development cycles and very harsh realities. Okay. I mean, I agree with that. I just look at it and I don't see where you get the numbers. I mean, maybe, possibly, 3, he already knows he cannot win. Okay, well, I would assume so. I don't think you could look at it at this point and say that he's going to be able to win. 4, so he's playing the long game. Oh, well, my assumption was, I mean, once he's out of office, why in God's name would you ever come back? I wouldn't. Have to put up with the press has done to him for the last 4 years. I wouldn't want to come back to that. I've said repeatedly, I think it was a complete surprise to him that he won. I'm not somebody who reads body language well, but I know enough certain kinds of tells. And when he won, I thought it was a complete surprise to him. I think he thought he was going to lose, and when he won, he was totally surprised. So I don't see where he does anything except walk away. I wouldn't. To win the long game 2024 re-election, he has to have a level playing field. Well, yes, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but why would you want to come back? I wouldn't want to come back. And I think, it's one of the things I look at the differences between both the Democrat and Republican Party and the Libertarian Party, right? In the Libertarian Party, if somebody loses, there's a good chance they'll run them again. Democratic and Republican Party don't usually do that. They don't usually run someone who has lost again. Maybe he'd want to come in for 2024, but I don't know why. If I were him, I would be happy to see the back of the presidency and never see it again. I just don't see any reason why you would want to. I wouldn't want to. Marshall says 6, to get a level playing field, he has to create such an uproar regarding election integrity that Republican legislatures in key states make the required changes to increase integrity. Again, I think you're talking about this presupposes that he even wants to come back for another term. I know I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to come back for another term. That'd be horrifying. Maybe he will, but if you've got your chance to just be as old as he is and ride off into the sunset, well, hell, ride off into the sunset. I'm different because you couldn't get me to even run for president. I would say no, and I would do everything in my power to sabotage it so I couldn't win. So that's part of why. But I just look at everything he's gone through for the last 4 years, and even his son, his youngest son, having to get some backlash because of it, which I've never seen happen before. Republicans hated Bill Clinton, but they didn't go after his daughter. That's been something that's been off the table. Marshall says, 7, he's an alpha narcissist. Yes, of course he wants to hold the most powerful position in the world. He knows he's right. I don't know. I guess say for me, I just wouldn't want to touch it with a 10-meter cattle prod. Maybe he'll come back. I don't know. Maybe. But regardless, he's not going to win this time around. He's not going to win this time around. Whether the Republicans will run him again, I don't know, because they have, like I say, they have a good history, unlike the Libertarians, of not running people who have lost before. And it may be that after 4 years of having politics back to normal, average politician isn't going to want to see him run either, because he's made their life too difficult for the last 4 years. Yes, I am not an alpha narcissist, Bill. That's absolutely true, which is why I don't want the freaking office in the first place. I am neither a narcissist nor a power-mad sociopath. Okay, let me throw something out here because, as I mentioned toward the top of the show, we had a nut job in suburban Omaha. He killed 2 people, he shot 2 people, wounded 2 others, and attempted to destroy a Sonic drive-through restaurant with a flaming car. So you may notice that my current thing down here in the corner, or wherever you may see any branding of mine, I have changed it to be a big red letter N, which is Nebraska Cornhuskers, with my usual guy on it, my usual jackalope on it, in some level of solidarity with those people who were killed and injured. As always say on things like this, whether you see me or not, people who are victims or family of victims, if there is anything that my family or my family of viewers can do to help you, let me know. I know it's trite, but I always throw it out there. We are kind people. My audience is great. If we can help you, let us know. Marcia says, I'll know in the week following the inauguration if I'm over the target. He'll announce his 2024 candidacy that week, and 30. Maybe. We'll see. I don't know. We'll have to see. Anyhow, so I was looking for information on this, naturally. And, of course, I go, okay, I'm going to have to do this thing where I sit down and I track backwards until I've got somebody who looks like patient 0, and they're the ones that actually did it. Well, fortunately, of course, being physically close to one of these nut jobs this time, found patient 0 pretty easily. It was the Omaha World Herald, which, amazingly enough, has the domain name omaha.com. I don't know when they would have registered that, but it must have been fairly long time ago. You can't get my domain, wrstone.com. You can't get SYLranch.com, SYLranch.net. I tried all of those. SYLranch.tv is what I have. But we did have this nut job go psycho and kill people. So I looked for the usual thing, okay, where's patient 0? And again, fortunately enough, I'm close enough geographically that patient 0 was Omaha World Herald, which is the paper of record both for Omaha and for Nebraska as a rule. So I go looking at patient 0, and much to my shock, my complete and utter shock, they have a good bit of journalism here. I was floored. Now, as everyone who's ever watched me do one of these things where I check out and see just exactly how accurate a news story is, and usually find that it's totally inaccurate, I always tell people I can usually in a half hour prove one of 3 things. Either that the event being reported never happened, that event being reported didn't happen as it's reported, or if you take away all of the flashy interface, the stuff that isn't related to it, the filler, and things like pictures that don't have any bearing on it, you find that maybe you got a couple of paragraphs at best worth of facts. Well, to my absolute shock, The Omaha World-Herald has something about this that is so close to real reporting that I couldn't believe it, what I was seeing. I didn't have to sit there and wonder if anything is accurate. I mean, it may not be accurate, but the way they've done this, they have actually done a good job. So let us have a look here at this story in the Omaha World-Herald. Now, ordinarily, what you do is you take things like pictures and you ditch them because you can never tell for sure where the hell they came from. Well, in this case, they are very nicely sourced here for us. Omaha police investigators worked Sunday morning to collect evidence where 2 people were killed and 2 others were wounded in a Saturday night shooting at the Sonic Drive-In restaurant located at 1307 Cornhusker Road. Robert Carlos Silva was arrested for the shooting. And then here we have Chris Makian, I think, from the Omaha World-Herald. So we know where we got these pictures. It came from this paper, came from this guy. These pictures do, in fact, relate to the incident. So many times you will have pictures that are totally don't relate at all. So, I mean, if we look at some of these, we can see some of where they've been working. Pretty boring, to be honest. But you can see they got, all kinds of pictures, and they're actually sourced, and they're actually from the location. And they talk about a moving truck burned during the shooting, causing damage at the Sonic. So this particular case, we can look at these pictures and say, wow, these pictures are actually related to what's happening. And that doesn't happen very often. Now this one, we're going to ignore for the moment. This actually is something pertinent to the article. We've got Lieutenant Andy Deshinsky. He probably made some kind of statement, but we're going to ignore it for now. We're going to forget about it for a moment. So, God, look at this guy. There's crazy. So let me just read you this as written. I may pop in once in a while with a bit of a backseat driving. Okay, the article reads, 2 people were shot to death and 2 others suffered gunshot wounds in the parking lot of a Bellevue fast food restaurant Saturday night, police said. Bellevue police were called to the Sonic Drive-In at 1307 Cornhusker Road at 9:23 p.m. Officers sent to the scene first were told that a bomb may be inside a moving truck parked in the parking lot. The incident was declared a shooting 1 minute later. The first officer arrived at 9:26 p.m. and a suspect was taken into custody shortly thereafter, said Bellevue Police Lieutenant Andy Deshinsky. 23-year-old man Robert Carlos Silva of Omaha was booked into the Sarpy County Jail at 4:31 a.m. on suspicion of first-degree murder and first-degree arson. Silva had been arrested at this restaurant Wednesday night on suspicion of identity theft after someone reported that a person had charged $57 on his Sonic app to pay for hamburgers and corn dogs. Silva was released from jail. This is the one that blows my mind. Silva was released from jail Thursday after posting 10% of a $1,500 bail. 10% of a $1,500 bail? How did this get down that quick? Guy killed 2 people for sure, tried to kill 2 others, may have tried some arson, and yet he's got a $1,500 bail, only posted to have to post 10% of it. Guy's out walking around right now. Anyway, when a reporter went Sunday to a residence in southwest Omaha where Silva lived with his parents, someone inside declined to open the door. A man who arrived at the home as the reporter was leaving acknowledged that it was the Silva family's home, but he declined to comment. In Bellevue, the parking lot of the Sonic Drive-In was blocked off with barricades. A man wearing a Sonic ball cap standing outside the restaurant said the restaurant owner had no immediate comment about the tragedy. Saturday night, officers found 4 people with gunshot wounds at the Sonic. 2 people were declared dead at the scene. 2 others were taken to Nebraska Medical Center, and we've got a tweet from that. U-Haul truck in the parking lot was on fire because of fireworks or some kind of device, Jasinski said. Officials were working Sunday to figure out what was inside the truck. Also early Sunday, the Omaha Police bomb squad was still on the scene to check on a quote-unquote device. that Jasinski said as a precaution to make sure the area was safe. The people who were shot will be identified after relatives are notified, Jasinski said. The Sarpy County Sheriff's Office, the Nebraska State Patrol, the Omaha Police Department's Crime Lab and Bomb Squad, and rescue crews from multiple local departments assisted in the scene. Anyone with information about the case is asked to call the Bellevue Police Department at 402-293-3100 or the Sarpy County Crime Stoppers at 402-592-STOP. That is a hell of a piece of journalism. You know why? Because you probably got bored listening to me and watching the thing. That is the sign of a good piece of journalism. It was damn near boring. It read like nothing but a timeline of events. And that's all. We got some pictures that are on the scene. We have some piece of video, and I'm not going to play it, but some piece of video by police department, the Bellevue Police Department, who's giving out information. And these pictures blow my mind because 90% of the time pictures in these things have nothing whatsoever to do with the article. And here we have 12 of them that not only have to do with the article, but they're sourced at the bottom. I guess we got more like 10. Says exactly what this is. Says who took it. Multiple. Look, I'm surprised they had. Well, this is probably one of the bigger stories we've had in a while. But they had multiple people at the scene taking pictures. All of which, Jessica Wade, all of which are, sourced, and they say exactly what they are. And again, the whole article is just reading like this is what happened from beginning to end. They even get in a bit here. God, this guy just blows my mind. Can God, if I was going to guess about somebody who's going to snap and go nuts with a gun. But again, it just reads like nothing. It's just one event to the next, and that's all that's being reported. There is nothing in here talking about gun control. It is just factual stuff from beginning to end, and it's sourced, and you can take it to those sources and say, is this what happened, and get a confirmation. That, by God, is good journalism. The Omaha World Herald, World Herald. The World Herald has done an extraordinary job here. This is a very, very good article. I wish all news articles were like this, where they basically just walk you through the facts. And that's all. So much so that when you read it like I did, probably got boring for you. That's the sort of thing we should be having in terms of actual news. So, by the way, the Omaha World Herald. Back before he was much of anything, Bill Cosby made his name in stand-up comedy by, they think they're largely made-up characters, but they were based on people from his own childhood. Fat Albert is the one that you hear about all the time. Fat Albert had a bunch of friends. One of these friends was Weird Harold. So having been around Lincoln and Omaha, not that far, and having been around the World Herald most of my adult life, save for the 20 or so years I wasn't here. For years and years, I called it the Weird Herald. My father called it the Weird Herald because we knew those characters from back when Bill Cosby was okay. So anyway, good piece of journalism. Great on you, Omaha World Herald. Never thought I'd see anything this good. I really assumed that when I saw this thing, I was going to also see some kind of, we should have gun control because of this or that. No, none of that in there. None of that in there. It's just reading boring, like a nice, boring story. That's what it should be. That's what it should be. People who are just walking out the facts. Good on you, Omaha Weird Herald. Good on you. Well, let's see. Looks like it's been about 2 hours. And I'm not seeing a ton of other stuff coming in. So, because, again, I kind of found out a few weeks ago that an hour and a half seems to be a little bit more approachable to people after the show who are watching it on demand. So it's been 2 hours. I'm going to just probably let it go there. As always, that is all that I have to say about that. I would love to keep this conversation going, so please do leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks, and I'll do my best to get back to you. So thank you for watching. That is all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.